Throughout the readings of Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle and Cesar Bessarius on Crimes and Punishments, the theme between both justice and punishment is evident to be that authoritative figures have primary control over individuals' own lives, through social experiments, torture, and the looking-glass self-theory. There are identifiable actions of punishment and torture through the work of science and cruelty. The Stanford Prison Experiment deals with the suppression of individuals in the social roles that they are surrounded by. This image was taken during the experiment as individuals were labeled as both prisoner and prisoner guard. The experiment is seen as indefinitely unjust, yet in the eyes of Zimbardo it is a conquest, because the social construct would not have been as obviously noticeable without the pain and punishment that the experimenters put their subjects through. This relates to Aristotle's own meaning of justice, that in the eyes of science this situation should be seen as just because of the breakthrough that it created in social psychology. Yet it does still create the concept of de-individuation that led these individuals to do the acts that they did in the experiment. Though Aristotle relays on what justice is, many believe that what occurred in the basement of Stanford University in 1971 was unjust and inhumane. Leaving punishment up to those with authority is a key part in our social role, to show obedience to those with higher power. The Milgram experiment in 1965 indicated the assumptions that we all carry today, that individuals show obedience to those with an authoritative presence. The Milgram experiment was an obedience test in which experimenters told random people to shock another individual that they could not see but they could hear. Though the shock that was being administered was fabricated, the individual administering the shock did not know that. As the shocks became more intense and the actors screaming more painful to hear, the administrators did not stop shocking the other subject, all because the experimenter asking for the participant to continue and proclaiming that it was very important that the experiment continues. The experiment showed that around 65% of the participants were obedient in administering deathly shocks to another, providing us with the assumption that we all are obedient around authoritative figures, leaving an open-ended idea of what justice and punishment are. If we are punished by authority, is it just then? Or is it the same as being punished by a stranger that has no authoritative power? These questions remain and are spoke through the words of Bessarius and Aristotle, yet still left to the judgment of individuals who were involved in the punishable acts. Aristotle's form of justice relays mainly in the eyes of the convicted, yet this may not be a very efficient way of dealing with justice and punishment. In a court of law, justice is served to those who deserve it, yet there are many occasions that individuals are not given justice for issues that involve the identity of the individual being prosecuted. As seen in the cartoon, justice is not always served in the correct manner or form. There are individuals that play a role in the outcome of a trial that can cause the outcome to be unjust. Justice is not always set in stone or equal. There are many instances that justice has not played in favor of individuals of different races also. With Aristotle's ideals of justice, individuals themselves who believe they are just are seen so without the actions necessary from a higher authority. The cartoon also shows how our justice system does not always see the justice that other individuals see. Bessarius' own virtues are even more apparent in the aftermath of justice called to order by higher authorities. Bessarius validates the purpose of punishment and which individuals before others are in need of it, and how far the extent of punishment can be pushed before it is torture. Abu Ghraib is an example of the separation between punishment and torture. Bessarius reminds the readers that punishment should be used to keep a criminal from committing the crimes again. Yet the U.S. Army took their punishment on Iraq prisoners to extreme and horrendous measures. A prisoner was told to balance on a cardboard box, and if the individual were to fall, they would be electrocuted. The line between punishment and torture was crossed. As Bessarius relates punishment to a crime, he also notes that torture is not a just way of punishment, leaving the acts of the U.S. Army soldiers in Abu Ghraib to be unjust in their actions and treatment to other prisoners of war. This is another significant piece to how social roles in life in prison is seen as unjust because of the retaliations that authorities take on prisoners. The looking-glass self-concept in social psychology is another influence in the work of both Bessarius and Aristotle. The looking-glass theory examines an individual as they see themselves through the eyes of others. For example, there are many instances individuals have asked themselves, how would someone view me walking down the street? The image identifies how many individuals want to see their ideal self as an individual that the looking glass self theory would see as ideal as well. Yet, as our cartoon shows, many individuals do not see themselves as they want to, or they perceive themselves as worse than they actually are. Aristotle and Bessarion provide evidence behind this social psychological theory in the basic terms of justice and punishment, as justice and punishment can be dealt accordingly if an individual were to look correctly or act as if they had done nothing wrong.